On today's episode of Locked On Predators, we have a crossover episode with our good friend Erica Ayala from Locked On Kraken. Tonight, the Nashville Predators take on the Seattle Kraken in Seattle, and Erica and I sat down to talk about where each of these two teams find themselves at this point in the season, what each team may be looking to do with the upcoming trade deadline, and we spend a little bit of time talking about Nashville's favorite Kraken, Calle Jarnkrok.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Kimmel from Locked On Predators. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am usually joined by my partner in crime, Nick Morgan, but today we have a crossover episode with our good friend, Erica Ayala from Locked On Kraken. We're here to preview for you the Kraken Predators game coming up tonight at 9 p.m. Central Time, taking place in Seattle. We have all your information about how these teams are doing, and we spent a little bit of time talking about that looming trade deadline.
And it is always a delight to chat with you. We are now officially in the same time zone. I have been speaking.
Unbelievable.
I know. I feel like, we haven't skipped a beat very much because we were obviously doing the Olympic coverage for the Locked On NHL show with Rachel Donner, who's one of the co-hosts of Locked On Flyers. But now we're back. And as I'm back into the swing, wouldn't you know, it's Nashville and the Kraken.
Come on. We timed this really perfectly. I'm so glad they scheduled the Olympics around what works best for the Kraken Predators calendar. That was very thoughtful. Very thoughtful.
Yes, very good, very good. It's also, of course, today, March 2nd, as I mentioned, second day of Women's History Month. And there's an official decree that this is Seattle Kraken Day in Seattle. So it's a big day for us.
Nice.
Big day for us. Lots of really cool stuff. I talked about that on yesterday's show. But Ann, I don't know. We've talked about it before. Can Nashville spoil the Seattle Kraken party? We're going to talk about it. Let's first talk about Nashville as our guests here on Locked On Kraken. Now let's talk about the last handful of games. If we look over at NHL.com, you are 4-5-1, the Nashville Predators, that is, in your last 10 games. Seattle Kraken, 2-7-1. We're both coming off of a one-game losing skid. But tell us, looking at those numbers, what's the vibe like? What have been some of the conversations you and Nick have been having about Nashville in this stretch?
Well, 4-5-1 is not at all where Nashville wants to be, but I will tell you that we don't feel quite as panicked as maybe the numbers say. Nashville's coming off of a really difficult 7-game stretch where we played, Florida Panthers, Tampa Bay Lightning, the Dallas Stars, and this is a really tight Central Division race. And so we've had some really tough games, dropped more than we would have liked. We've had a hard time getting the groove back since the All-Star break. But for the most part, it's small adjustments that Nashville needs to make when they come out of these losses. There have just been small adjustments that they've needed to make. They did win against the Florida Panthers, which was a huge win. They got 2 points against Dallas, which was a huge win. They had a great time at the Stadium Series on Saturday against Tampa Bay, but didn't come home with 2 points. So kind of coming into it on a little bit bumpy terrain, but also the wheels haven't come off the bus.
Okay. I love that for Nashville. Can't say we check all those boxes here in Seattle.
Oh, no.
I know, but we do have this fabulous Black History Month hat.
Okay, it is fabulous.
And design.
It is fabulous.
So for those listening, if you haven't already checked out the March 1 episode, because I will actually be doing a giveaway for one of these bad boys. And I was talking on yesterday's show where I did an outreach to Seattle Kraken fans or just hockey fans saying like, I want to get my hands on this, but I am not in Seattle. I believe I was still in China. And wouldn't you know, bless their hearts, someone reached out. Not only did they offer to purchase this for me, as well as the hoodie, which is very soft. Do I still have it? I showed it on yesterday's episode, but it's very soft. But then they sent it to me, got it here, and they would not accept any reimbursement. And they just said to pay it forward. So that's what we're doing. We're paying it forward.
That is okay. First of all, that's wonderful that you were paying it forward. And that was so thoughtful of someone to hook you up. I don't know anybody who deserves it more. But second of all, that hat is fantastic.
It's so nice. It's so nice. Of
It
course,
really is.
yeah, the colors really pop, especially on the black. The colors representative of the Pan-African flag to unite a lot of the African countries. And so we talked about it on last week or yesterday's show, excuse me. And can you tell I'm stalling a little bit here because I really don't want to get into
You don't want to tell me what's going on in Seattle? Come on.
I wanted to just start on a high note. Seattle fans are the best. They truly are the best. They're hooking me up. And because of that, I am paying it forward as I promised I would. So first and foremost, thank you all. And we are excited to host the Predators tomorrow. But like, you know, we don't have quite as many wins in our last 10 games. Lots of tough losses where, you know, the Seattle Kraken are unfortunately just not able to sustain a lead. And that's been the MO all season. It's you know, going up a goal or two and then having to really scrap it out towards the end of a game, and you know, pulling a goalie and having scoring an empty netter on us. And it's the little things, right? It's the little defensive breakdowns. I know we've talked before about the Seattle Kraken and goaltending. I think Philip Grubauer coming out of the All-Star break has been fantastic for the Seattle Kraken. I know we have seen a little bit more of an equitable divide of the crease, which I've been asking for quite some time, especially now that, you know, the road ahead for us this season not looking great for the Seattle Kraken. But you know, we are coming off of our most recent loss to the San Jose Sharks, a team that, you know, we've been able to meet some success against, but not this time. They get the 3-1 win. Also lost a game 3-2 to Boston, you know, a 5-2 back-to-back 5-2 losses to Vancouver and the Islanders, a 2-1 loss to the Flames. So, you know, it's the Seattle Kraken are within striking distance, but it's like I say on the show all the time. It's like dealing with teenagers, you know, you say the message, but it doesn't always get through. It's not always as polished as you want it to be. So some of the growing pains of a new franchise here. And so we talked about it before. And the last time these two teams faced off, January 25th, the Predators got that win. You know, it was a 4-2 win for the Preds. The first game, of course, we know, and it's one of the firsts for the Seattle Kraken. And it seems
You're
like
welcome.
it's a long ways. October 14th, 2021,
Yeah.
we get our first ever franchise win. It was a 4-3 win. So on the one hand, the Seattle Kraken are coming in with the most recent loss. On the other hand, the series is split. So, and you know, given the stats and just how Nashville is performing, what does the Nashville Predators team have to do in order to make sure that they do win this series, this season series against the Seattle Kraken?
Well, I will tell you that the Nashville Predators are a very different team now than they were in that first game. And I like to think that that was just Southern hospitality. We were so excited to meet the Seattle Kraken. Welcome to Bridgestone Arena. We'd be happy to drop a game for you because that's just how we roll. Here's a sweet tea and a win. But we're a very different team, I think, the Nashville Predators are right now at this point in the season. It took them some time to find their groove, to really kind of solidify their identity, to solidify how they wanted to play, and to get everybody pulling in the same direction. And I think we're seeing that now with Nashville. So I think you're going to see a very similar team to the team that beat the Kraken. I think that they are all pulling in the same direction. I think the mistakes are a little bit smaller mistakes. I think we're a little more challenging to play against physically as well. So I'm thinking that probably Nashville is going to be more like the Nashville of late than that very generous, kind, welcoming Nashville of October.
Oh man. So the Southern hospitality does have an expiration date, is essentially what you're
Yes,
telling me. Okay.
that is
All right.
100% right. Yes.
Good to know. Good to know. As far as Seattle, I mean, I mentioned it, the inconsistencies that you see with a team, this teenager NHL team, as I like to say. I do think that the inconsistencies remain, coupled with injuries. We've seen some pretty key players, key leaders be out either indefinitely or for the season. I mean, as we're talking, it's a Tuesday, so that's a Turbo Tuesday here for us. But sans Turbo, Brandon Tanev is one of our players that's out for the season.
Yes.
You've seen that Jaden Schwartz and Jared McCann, those are big contributors to the offense that quite honestly, I don't know if anemic is the right word, but definitely inconsistent. And so we rely heavily on those who are contributors. So that's a little bit of a challenge. I did mention that Grubauer, I think, has played much better, but those teenage tendencies continue to bite us in the butt. And unfortunately, the highs that we get from taking a lead or even getting a few goals up on a team are always coupled with the Seattle Kraken just not quite getting into a full 60-minute groove. And I think it would be great to see the turnaround, but I think we have to err on the side of what we've seen the most of. And unfortunately, it's just not quite being able to finish out these games. But, that gets me thinking, though. It seems like Nashville's in a pretty good spot. The Seattle Kraken, I mean, Ron Francis has already been asked and has talked about what next season and free agency looks like, because of course we're coming up on the trade deadline. So I think our
Yes.
teams are probably in very different positions when it comes to the trade deadline. So we're going to talk about that and a mutual that we have, and maybe where Calle Jarnkrok falls when it comes to the trade deadline. So that is coming up next. But Anne, are you hungry? I get a little hungry sometimes when I do these.
Oh my gosh, I'm hungry pretty much all of the time. And your talk about, your team being like a teenager reminds me of my 17-year-old who all he wants to do is eat and eat something semi-healthy.
I love that. Those are good habits to have,
Well, they are.
Mama on Ice is doing it right.
Well, let me tell you what I did. So we talked about this so many times. I ordered a box of the mixed flavor Built Bars. If you guys have not tried Built Bars, this is something that you really need to try. Take it from me and my very hungry 17-year-old. You can try, they have Built Bar Puffs. If you haven't tried those, you're missing out on one of their best tasting treats. Puffs are a protein infused marshmallow, which sounds weird, but tastes amazing. It's not just a protein bar. It's like eating a treat. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. They come in great flavors. My 17-year-old loves the churro. That was his favorite. For me, it is all about the banana cream pie. They are so good. They're going to be your favorite. If maybe marshmallows are not your jam, you don't have to worry. All the Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They are low calorie. They're high protein. So instead of coming home from school and grabbing a candy bar or some sugary cereal, he comes home, he grabs himself a Built Bar out of the cabinet. So much better for him. If you go to built.com, you can scroll down on the macros chart. You can see all the numbers for yourself. Built Bars contain 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. If you compare that to a candy bar, usually 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, my heavens, and dozens of net carbs. They also have flavors that your 17-year-old and you will want to eat. Mint brownie, coconut almond. I love the mint brownie. I'm not going to lie. Those are my favorites. New for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. Look, they're
Ooh.
all good tasting. Love the cherry barcia was also another yummy one. It's like a chocolate covered cherry. So good, but full of protein. Anyway, go to built.com. Just trust me on this. Use promo code LOCKED15. You will get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
And as I always like to say, happy snacking.
Always happy snacking. Is there an unhappy snacking?
Shouldn't be. That's not, it's
No.
like anti-snack code or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Not real.
Not real. Well, as always, we want to thank you for making either Locked On Predators or Locked On Kraken your first listen of the day. But that's not where it stops. We have game day previews, we have recaps, and you should definitely check out the Locked On Now podcast. So Anne, Nick, myself, other people from the Locked On NHL network, we will get in front of a camera once again and wax poetic about how awesome our team is after a win and get really rowdy after a loss. So check out the Locked On Now podcast for nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis, from your Locked On hosts. All right, Anne, it's time to get down to it. We know that the trade deadline is coming up, and on Locked On NHL, we're actually going to have those experts that we were talking about give a team by team breakdown of the trade moves that potentially could happen. So when it comes to the Seattle Kraken, there are a lot of conversations about what the team is going to do, looking at who are UFAs, unrestricted free agents, who are RFAs, restricted free agents, and of course then how much money the team has to play with. I think our teams are in very different positions. We brand new franchise, struggling mightily in our inaugural season. So either unloading some of these contracts to find the right pieces, or keeping the right pieces and then figuring out how to do the math is going to be massive for us. And we're going to get into that a little bit more throughout the week. But since we have you, Anne, I wanted to talk not just about the Nashville Predators a little bit and what your take has been over on Locked On Predators, but also, as I mentioned, a mutual that we have in Calle Jarnkrok.
Yes.
And what do you think could happen potentially for Calle at the trade deadline?
Yeah, Calle Jarnkrok is one of those Nashville Predators who may be gone, but he is certainly not forgotten. Losing Jarnkrok to the Seattle Kraken in the expansion draft really kind of rocked Nashville Predators, because Calle Jarnkrok was one of those maybe not so talked about players, but his value was huge to this team, and he is missed. He has not really been able to be replaced or replicated in this lineup. You know, the Predators have a good season going and they've got a lot of great things going, but there's something about Calle Jarnkrok where he can kind of go in the lineup anywhere, first line, fourth line, fill in, jump in, and play well. So he has been missed. And it's interesting to me that you say, you know, this is a piece that may be open to some movement, because I'm just speaking for me, but Nashville would take him back, like with open arms. Like, we are sorry for what we have done. We will not do it again. But Calle Jarnkrok, one of the pieces that I think that Nashville is perhaps open to looking for is somebody who can kind of help that second line scoring. And Calle Jarnkrok is one of those pieces where he fits in really well. He's very well known to Nashville. So I'm not at all opposed to you just giving him back.
Yeah, listen, 8 seasons with Nashville before, being essentially carted off to Seattle because of that pesky expansion draft.
Oh.
But and Calle just a great presence. We're basically all but everything, I should say almost everything is Zoom now, or has been for a little while there. But getting to know Calle when I was in Seattle for training camp and preseason. Just has a great just demeanor and presence.
Yes.
And to your point about being a staple on a second line for a team, that has been critical for a Seattle Kraken team who, again, I talked about Grubauer, but there's certain players that you just you're not worried about, and Calle Jarnkrok is one of them. I mean, in 43
Yes.
games, 43 games played already, has a better face-off percentage than last season, is almost at the 49 games played from last season with Nashville, on pace to surpass his 13 goals from his season with Nashville last year, has 10 for Seattle, has 12 assists, had 15 for Nashville last season. Overall shots are also pretty much on target, had 91
Yep.
for Nashville last season, is at 70 for the Seattle Kraken. Now the plus minus, that's a little brutal. He was at plus 13.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's for everyone on the Seattle Kraken. What's interesting here is that is plus 13 to end the season with Nashville last year is at the exact opposite of that, negative 13. Yikes. For the Seattle Kraken. But
Yeah.
again, when you have response goals, defensive breakdowns, really tough with getting their pockets picked on entries and exits are the Seattle Kraken. It doesn't matter if you're the one coughing up the puck, but if you're on the ice, that's how that stat
You
works.
get it. Yep, and that stat, I think that stat's a little bit of a hoax, but we'll still allow it. We'll allow it. But one of the things about Calle Jarnkrok that I love is that so much of what he does really isn't statistically measurable. He is one of those hockey players who sees the ice, who anticipates what's going to happen next, who is very good at reading the people he plays with and kind of gauging what are they going to do next and having the puck ready for them. And that's one of those things I tell you in Nashville we really miss is that sort of intangible hockey sense that Calle Jarnkrok has. And, it's definitely missed.
Yeah, and that's what makes it tough, I think, for the Seattle Kraken. And or I should say, I'm going, and I sent this over to you, and I know we've looked at it, but I'm going off of the work that the amazing Ryan S. Clark, who is the beat writer for The Athletic and covers the Seattle Kraken, but talking about, pending unrestricted free agents where Jarnkrok falls into that, Marcus Johansson as well, Jonas Donskoy, these are players where, to your point, I think Jarnkrok fits that mold in doing all of the right things, even for a team that's not looking particularly great in a lot of statistical categories. The Seattle Kraken need to establish a culture. And I do wonder what happens if, for example, by the 21st, you do deal a Calle Jarnkrok who is willing and is more than capable of doing that kind of glue work and keeping and sustaining just a constant attack for a team. When you lose that because you're playing that numbers game, how long does that then put you out from the ultimate goal, which we know is, of course, well, in the case of the Seattle Kraken, to just break through and make the playoffs. But then ultimately, every team's looking for a championship. And you can't do that if you don't have the grinders, if you don't have the hard workers, if you don't have the people that have that good vision on the ice. And so this is what I think is going to make it really difficult for the Seattle Kraken when it comes to the trade deadline and free agency, because people are noticing the record and wanting the team to perform better. And that makes total sense. But what buttons do you push thinking and comparing the here and now versus what you want down the line? But I feel like it's got to be a little bit of a different scenario for Nashville. Whereas you've had that history of making the playoffs, you want to get back there, but you also already have some consistency baked into the franchise where we have none. So how do you think Nashville's going to approach free agency that will come up in the offseason, but the trade deadline that's coming up later this month?
So much in Nashville hinges on one name, and that is Philip Forsberg. We are waiting every single day. I'm not going to lie. I wake up and I think, Lord, let this be the day that Philip Forsberg signs with the Nashville Predators again. He's in contract negotiations. His people are meeting with general manager David Poyle. David Poyle's very upfront that he would, the goal is to re-sign Philip Forsberg. And I think so much about Nashville's decisions before March 21st are going to be hinging on getting Philip Forsberg signed. And if they can't come to some agreement, that is going to affect what Nashville does before the 21st.
Mm.
So much hinges on Philip Forsberg. I do think that the Predators are maybe going to look for a defenseman, some sort of defensive component to kind of shore up a defense that's been beaten and battered. I'm just saying that you all may have somebody there that Nashville's looking at.
I was gonna say, who are some of the other people? Our captain, which is wild. I mean, just from like an optics perspective, I get this. This is a business, but Mark Giordano has been one of the first names as soon as we
Yes.
saw how this Seattle Kraken season was gonna go, like officially, not on paper, but like, ooh, okay, this is really happening. Gio was one of the names, and again, I don't think that has anything to do with what he brings, but it has everything to do with playing the numbers game, which is exactly how we
Yes.
got him in the first place.
Yes. Yeah, and I think he is somebody. Look, I know that Nashville has had scouts at some Seattle Kraken games. I'm curious to see who they're looking at, but I would not be surprised if Mark Giordano is somebody that Nashville is in conversation about, because I think that they're going to want to shore up a defense that is doing well, but because of injuries has some weaker spots where they could use somebody with some more experienced veteran presence. So this is one that I'm very interested to see where he, if he stays, if he goes, where does Mark Giordano go? Because I think he's somebody that perhaps Nashville might be interested in.
So only time will tell, and if and when we do see some of these Kraken players make their way to Music City, we're just gonna have to have you back. And but
That's right.
exactly. Well, we're not quite done with this episode yet, because later this week, officially, the Paralympics will kick off in Beijing, China. We've been talking about the Paralympics. We're so excited. But Anne, since my return, a lot has happened in the world, and it has certainly impacted the hockey community. So coming up next, we're going to talk briefly just about how the hockey community has essentially responded to the conflict and the attack on the Ukraine by Russia, and honestly how that could impact the Paralympics and some other things that are happening within the hockey community. So as always, we want to thank you again just for making us your first listen, whether it's Locked On Preds or Locked On Kraken. We're here for you every day, daily podcast of your favorite NHL team. But Anne, we have to talk about some real life stuff, because
Yes.
hockey is a part of the greater global community, and we're really seeing that in a big way. I mentioned, obviously, we had the Olympic coverage that you and I shared. We have the Paralympics coming up, but then all of these two events that are supposed to be about, together for a shared future, which was the motto in Beijing for the Olympics. And then we come into some real life stuff where we're seeing in real time a conflict, an armed conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, and it's having an impact. We've even seen that the NHL has responded. I closed that out. Hold on. Well, delete. Pause for
All
dramatic
good.
effect. Yeah, I pulled it up and then I lost it. So we've seen the NHL respond. This came last month, February 28th. The National Hockey League condemns Russia's invasion of Ukraine and urges a peaceful resolution as quickly as possible. But then the statement went on to say that effective immediately, we are suspending our relationships with our business partners in Russia, and we are pausing our Russian language social and digital media sites. No, the first part of that I think makes sense. In history,
Mhm.
I'm a history person. We've seen divestments for wars or different acts of aggression. Now,
Right.
what's new is the Russian language social and digital media sites. For me, outside of the context of sport altogether, not communicating in a specific language, I don't know that that really hits the nail on the head when it comes to advocating for um, positive humanitarian exchanges
Yes.
and peace and unity. Wouldn't be the first thing at the top of my list. I don't know.
It feels a little bit like, ineffective low-hanging fruit.
Mm,
Just you know what I mean? Here is something that we can do that makes a statement, but really, I feel like you make the statement.
I know that we have covered, as we talked about, international ice hockey competitions. And I know that we will continue to talk about the Paralympics as they kick off in Beijing. But another thing is that the IOC, as we speak, is deciding whether they're going to, or
Mhm.
in what ways they're going to allow Russian athletes to compete. Now, we already have where the Russian Olympic Committee is the language used and not, Team Russia because of
Correct.
doping. So we've already seen that Russia is kind of, put in this position. But now we see that other federations are asking that Russian athletes not be able to compete under their. Some are asking that they not be able to compete at all. Others that they
Yes.
not be able to compete under their flag. Which I don't know that. I think that's kind of moot at this point because I didn't think that was a thing. But again,
Mhm.
it just seems like a tough situation if we
Yes.
talk about the humanity of it, which I think is important to hold on to even as there is an ongoing conflict, that these athletes, regardless of how they personally feel about the conflict, the invasion, or what their family and friend circle status is regarding having to um, account for the armed
Right.
forces. We don't know that, but they've prepared for the last 4 years, 3.5 years, 4 years to compete, and then within a week or less of the competition, because of actions of their government, they might not be able to compete, or like we saw, which was another kind of controversy, um, have this cloud over them.
Yes. Right. And I wonder, as we're gearing up for the Paralympics, I'll be honest with you, I'm constantly refreshing my browser and reaching out to some of the people that I'm in communication with regards to the Paralympics and just saying, hey, just checking in because this is a conversation that's being had and it's not nothing, especially in relationship to sled hockey. The Russia Paralympic Committee team took the bronze medal at Worlds in 2021. This is a team that very much could upset an apple cart in what is supposed to be a presumptive USA Canada gold medal match. This is not a peripheral team when
Yeah.
it comes to competition. And, I feel for the athletes because I know, just watching Team USA and being around the Paralympic sled hockey community, these teams work for years for this. And so it is heavy. And I don't know, I wonder there's a part of me that wonders how much of that cloud that you referenced from the Olympics with the ice skating, if any of that is going to sway a decision one way or the
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
So I'm really waiting with bated breath. As of the time of this recording, we still don't have an official word, but waiting to see kind of if there's going to be some sort of ban or repercussion for these athletes. And you know what? Look, it's just tough. I mean, that's an
Yeah.
understatement.
Well, and we went a little long. I'm so glad though that I was able to have you get you on a little bit of Tuesday's show, and of course, getting ready for the preview of today. It's again the Seattle Kraken, or it's Kraken Day in Seattle, I should say, officially 3-2, 22 2022. I don't know though. I think Nashville might come in and spoil the party, and that would be the last game for the Seattle Kraken until they go on the road for 5. So, and as always, thank you so much. Love what you and Nick are doing over at Locked On Preds, and I can't say I'm rooting for you tonight, but
I understand. And the feeling is mutual. The love
there
is
it is.
mutual. The good luck in all your other games is mutual as
Exactly.
well.
Exactly. And hey, we'll see what happens with Callie and Gio, cuz
That's right.
we might come next season have to talk about a revenge tour for them or some other Kraken players.
Very true. You never know in the next 3 weeks what's going to happen in the NHL.
You never know, but that's why you always make Locked On Predators and Locked On Kraken your first listen of the day. And now that you have given us our clicks over on our YouTube page and wherever you get podcasts, and these, of course, are 100% free for you as listeners, now it's time for you to head over to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, where Steel Roden and Flip Livingstone will help you become an expert in your fantasy league. I definitely should have tuned in to this podcast before I entered the Black Girl Hockey Club Fantasy League, because not great.
Well, at least you know where to go now.
But more to come from all of us here at the Locked On NHL channel. Again, make sure you're checking out all of our nows. And like we like to say at Locked On Kraken, we'll see you tomorrow.